Hi folks, it's me Michaela and welcome back to my channel. We are here for my October reading wrap up today. I really hope it's not too dark right now. I love fall, but unfortunately I forgot, the downsides of it is that the days are getting ever shorter. I accidentally had a nap earlier when I thought I was going to be filming this, but look, the nap was needed, so here we are fighting with darkness. I feel like I had a really good month of reading in October. I feel like I really kind of picked up the pace. I got back on track with my Goodreads reading goal, and I kind of feel like I just got a lot of stuff done reading wise. So let's dive into some of the numbers and statistics that I have noted here on my iPad, and then we can go through the books that I read. In the month of October, I read a total of 7 books. I had a really good mix of genre. I feel I had 1 classic novel, 2 mysteries, 2 fantasy books, and then also 2 books that I've called literary. I use the term literary to kind of just mean anything that doesn't fit into a distinctive genre for me. So it's mostly general fiction, but can include some other books. I did also have a good mix of new to me and reread books. I had 4 new books and 3 rereads this month. So 4 of the books were loaned reads that I read digitally on Libby, and then 3 of the books were owned reads, 2 of them physical, and 1 of them I read on Libby. I'll explain that when we get to the book. I read a total of 2,691 pages in October, which averages to about 384 pages per book and 87 pages per day, which I feel like is kind of right on track for me. I kind of feel like I generally average somewhere between 70 and 90 pages a day each month when I feel like I've had a good month. If it's less than that, it's kind of been a slow reading month. And my average rating for the month was 3.8 stars. Definitely not my highest month, but still very solid, very good month of reading. The first 2 books I read at the beginning of the month were for a reading vlog that I called Actually Reading My TBR. I am actually working on a second round of this reading vlog right now, but that is for a future video. So the first book I read for that was The Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This I ended up giving 3 stars. It's the 4th book in her Inheritance Games series. I keep wanting to call it a trilogy because in my brain there was 3 books and then it was supposed to be over, but this 4th book came out. I did want to read it, then I kind of didn't feel like reading it, and then I thought, you know what, why not just read it and see how it is. I'm done the series now because there is now The Grandest Game, which is the newest book in a new series that happens to be a spin-off series of the Inheritance Game series. I'm not going to be reading that. I personally just am not really being drawn to YA reads, so I think it's pointless for me to put any on my TBR at the moment. So I think this will probably be where I leave the Inheritance Games universe, world, whatever you want to call it. I did find The Brothers Hawthorne fine, but I also found it particularly annoying as well. I do find that these characters kind of all turned into a lot of just wealth flaunting in the book. It was very bizarre. Once some of the mystery got rolling, I liked it a bit more, but then I found it kind of waxed and waned with my interest of the mystery and the plot and all of that. I think if I was a young adult reader still, I probably would have loved this book, but because I'm not, this really felt more of a book for fans of the characters, it wasn't huge continuation of the plot of the story. It was more so, I don't want to necessarily say it was fan service, but it definitely felt like it was leaning that way, and so it just wasn't for me. There wasn't anything absolutely atrocious about the book. It was not horrible. It just like wasn't something that I was enjoying, and going into it I also was like, I don't really think this is what I'm gonna be liking, but here I am reading it anyway. So part of it was on me. I then, after that, read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed this book. I thought I would. This is one of those ones that I like marked as literary, but I think it's like technically under the realm of magical realism. But I really try to keep my genres to as few as possible for my statistics, because otherwise things are getting way too complicated. But I really liked the writing style for this. I really loved the fact that it's formatted in these like 4 short stories almost that have like interconnection because of the characters, but they're also each a fully encapsulated story on their own. I thought it gave a lot of weight and a lot of importance to the story of each character. This is also like a time traveling book, and I really love the way that it did time travel. I think I definitely would read more of the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series in the future, but I don't think it's necessarily a series that you like binge read. I feel like it's more of a like in between other reads, palate cleanser almost kind of book. You know, they're short stories and like novella length books. I think this one was like 220 something pages, so they're like really good quick reads to kind of get you out of a slump, and the writing's very nice, but the writing's also very powerful and the story is very powerful, so I really loved that. I then had my first physical read, and that was a reread of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I am not rating these books upon my reread. I am reading them for nostalgia, as I mentioned in my fall TBR, and also to just be a bit more critical of books I liked as a child. But you can also like things. Oh, my heating. I always forget to turn this off when I'm recording in the winter. We're back. But basically, like, you can like things from your childhood still and also be critical of the things you like. Actually, reading the 4th book right now, I'm having like a really fun, cute little time of like rereading the book and then watching the movie after. It just like gives very like fall vibes, I think. There's something about Harry Potter with, you know, the whole like castle and fantasy and school. Like, it all just gives me a lot of cozy fall vibes. I always feel like pulled to it this time of year, so I'm happy I'm finally getting around to like finishing this reread plan that I have for it. This is also the last book before the books start getting insanely long, so there's that. The reread will be going much slower after this point. I then had another reread, which was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I own this copy that has a collection of the Bronte sisters books that I got at a secondhand bookshop here in Montreal that has like Wuthering Heights, The Ten of Wildfell Hall, and Jane Eyre in it. So when I was doing my reread for Wuthering Heights, I did not actually read this copy and instead read a digital copy on Libby, and that is because this was like my major project for the entire month of October. I made a video explaining the entire plot of Wuthering Heights, so in order to do that, I was spending weeks rereading and taking notes on this in the evenings, and it was much easier to do that while reading digitally so that I would not be losing my place in a book all the time. I could pick up and put down my iPad way easier than picking up and putting down this book because she's chunky. Please don't fall over. But I did give Wuthering Heights 5 stars. Upon rereading, I realized how much I absolutely adore the insanity of Wuthering Heights, and it's just like one of those books that keeps your thoughts on it for like ages after you read it, and I think anything that does that has to be 5 stars. If it's like I read this book a week ago and I'm still thinking about it, like that's a 5-star book. Next up, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This I read for a reading vlog of reading the best books according to Goodreads, and I ended up giving this a 3.5 star rating. I found that it was like very well written and the characters were wonderful, and I loved that it was much more of a character driven story than a plot driven story, in my personal opinion. But I just didn't connect to the subject matter of the book, and because of that, just like could not fall in love with it, because the plot that was carrying this character driven story was just like couldn't hook me. If you're somebody who loves video games and video game development, especially from like the 90s and early 2000s, I think this book is amazing and you will love it. If you don't find that interesting, like me, you perhaps will not love it, like I know a lot of people have. And that I say that in the vlog. If you want to hear a lot of more of my thoughts, you can check that out. I'll have it linked. But another case of like, it wasn't for me, but I can definitely see why so many people adore Tomorrow. I then also read The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This was the first time I was reading Laura Dave. I had actually had this book marked on my TBR and I don't remember doing that, but clearly I did at some point. It's a mystery thriller kind of novel, and I felt like the dynamics between the characters and the initiation of the plot was really intriguing, and I loved where it was going, but then I felt like it just fell flat. So I had to also give this 3.5 stars. October was the month of 3.5 star ratings. Again, like I just was like disappointed in the end. I was getting up to the end of part 2 because the book was like in 3 equal parts. You know, you get to this huge cliffhanger like moment. The tension is really there. The plot has become more complex. Things are like starting to be revealed just enough that you start getting really curious, you know, because you don't actually know what's happening, but you're on a creepy little path to the mystery, but the door's not open. But then I felt like it didn't go anywhere, and I was so sad. It felt like you turned the page and then the tension just like died almost instantly, and the end of the book, like the whole last third, just felt like conclusion, and like not in a good way. And it really made me sad because like I really felt like that first 2/3 of the book were like 4.5 stars, and then the last third of the book was like 2. So I settled on a 3.5 because I still had like a good time for most of the book. But, you know, when you don't have a good ending, it's just unfortunate, isn't it? I would read Laura Dave again in the future, but, you know, like I'm not necessarily like itching to read more Laura Dave after the experience of being disappointed in this mystery thriller, have to admit. So the final book that I read this month was a reread of Shadows of Self by Brandon Ann Sanderson. Who am I? Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. And I kept this at its rating I gave it the first time of a 3.5 stars. When I reread The Alloy of Law, I bumped up the rating because I enjoyed it much more. This one, I still feel like it's a tad slow pacing wise. It's hard to like kind of push through it sometimes because you're reading it and then you're realizing that like almost the entire book happens in the span of like 2 days. So much of the book happens in one day, and it's just like, how is it still the same day? What is going on? But I do like this series. I find it super fun. I love all of the action in it and the mystery elements in the fantasy. It's kind of like mystery crime novels meets fantasy western world, and I really love where this sets up for the Bands of Mourning, but like this book just like wasn't really it for me. I do really like Brandon Sanderson's writing, and I'm happy I reread The Alloy of Law and now Shadows of Self so I can like move to the Bands of Mourning being like super fresh with it. I'm thinking I will like hopefully get to the Bands of Mourning in November, but like also who knows? I don't know anything at this point. It was a good read, and this again, something about like fall, October, November times, it's like it just calls for fantasy and mystery books, so like I really was like leaning into that for all of October. And that's all of the books I read in October. Hopefully you can still see me and it's not nighttime right now. Just kind of like a speed run through these books. I felt like most of them I talked about in depth in reading vlogs. So if you really want to know my thoughts more on these books, you can check out those vlogs. I'll have them linked down below for you. I don't really like repeating myself too much, but I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like, give it a little thumbs up. If you happen to like me, consider subscribing. I'd be happy to have you. If you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts, or let me know your favorite reads from the month. Everybody wants to know what your favorite book was. What was your least favorite book? That's the real question. Also, like, let me know what genres do you really lean towards and love reading during fall, spooky season, October, November, cozy, cold weather, sweater weather vibe. You know, like what genres bring you there? It's fantasy and mystery for me, but I feel like that's probably pretty common and most people think that. If you have other thoughts, let me know down below. And with that, I hope you're having a wonderful day today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.